Hello, welcome to this video about the Alexander and Ashoka Bloodline event chains. In this video I will be explaining to you the mechanics behind getting these two bloodlines. First of all, I will be talking about the Alexander bloodline. It has some requirements that you need to fulfill to be able to be eligible for the event chain. First of all, you need to be an emperor. Now luckily this character is an emperor. Secondly, he needs to have 15,000 or more prestige. So we can solve that with prestige 15,000. Next up, he needs to be an adult. Well, he is, and he needs to be a player-controlled character. Last time I checked, I am human, so we should be fulfilling that requirement. And next up, it needs to be a normal start, so not a randomized world or a shadowed world. Well, this looks pretty normal, so I think we are all set on that. He needs to not be content. Well, I just ruler designed a character that has no traits whatsoever, so all good. And he must not have gotten the event before, and also nobody can have forged the bloodline already for the event to be able to begin. Well, I will promise you on the 1st of January 769, no such event has happened yet. And lastly, the capital of your character needs to be either in Europe, Asia Minor, or the Near East. Europe is, of course, the very large chunk of land that is now highlighted. Asia Minor is the eastern parts of the Byzantine Empire, all the way to the Caucasus. And lastly, the Near East is the Arabian Peninsula and the parts of the world just north from there. Now, it might seem a little bit strange to claim to be a descendant of Alexander if you are a chief living in Lithuania, but for some reason they decided to start a mythological origin of their lineage that led back to the Romans. So if you can't claim to be a descendant of the Romans in Lithuania, then why not claim to be a descendant of Alexander the Great? It does take a little bit under 3 times as long on average if you are not in either Southern Europe or Asia Minor. Southern Europe being basically Greece, Italy, and the Balkans. And of course Asia Minor is the area already shown before. Furthermore, if you are not in the Latin, Byzantine or Arabic culture groups, then the time it takes on average for the event to appear do increase, and the same goes for not being Christian, Muslim or Hellenic. So our Lithuanian Romuva friends will have a bit of a harder time forging this particular bloodline. Lastly, the time it takes to get the event chain becomes twice as long on average if you are over 50. Sadly, there isn't much you can do about that unless you have a fountain of youth, but even then that'll only do the trick if you are only just over 50. On the flip side, there are a bunch of things that make the event more likely to happen. First of all, being Christian or Hellenic increase the chances of getting the event, basically meaning that Muslims are the only ones with the actual default chance of getting the event when it comes to religions. And also being Greek or in the Latin culture group will increase the chances of getting the event chain. Next up, as for the regions, if you are in the Asia Minor region, then that too increases the chances of getting the event. So basically you want to be a Christian Greek person in this region or something similar. With Reformed Hellenic, the Greeks have the largest increase though, but well, that's not available at the start. And as for the traits, being ambitious, brave and having a martial education and either a martial lifestyle or a scholar lifestyle all benefit the chances of getting the event chain to begin. High learning also gives an immense bonus, with it basically doubling the chances of getting the event for every 2 points of learning after 6. So starting with times 2 at 8 and making it really ginormously likely at 30. Higher prestige also makes it more likely at 22, 24, 26, 28, 30, 40 and 50k prestige. And if you are Hellenic, then that will also increase your chances of getting the event if you have high piety at 1000, 1500 and 2000 piety. Lastly, there is a bonus towards getting this event chain to begin if you are currently on the ambition to forge a bloodline, with an additional bonus at having won 5 or 10 wars. Obviously, once you get the event, you'll have to choose to pursue the bloodline. So let's see that event. You'll have 2 options. I will be the first to succeed, and that'll tell you that you are attempting to forge a claim, or you can just give up, and then obviously you're not going to get that bloodline. If you choose to pursue it, then you will get a follow-up event about 1 or 2 months later, and that follow-up event will give you some new options. Here we go, the Tomb of Alexander. We can choose to find his remains, and this is an intrigue option, or you can try to establish a valid claim, which is a learning option, or of course you can just give up, lose a bunch of prestige and not get the bloodline. But why on earth would you do that? Now, in general, you'll want to pick the option that fits with your skills, although your counselors do also influence your chances of success. Of course, the Spy Master or Mystikos, if you are Greek, will help in the intrigue choice, and your Core Chaplain will help in the learning choice. Aside from the counselors, it's also influenced by you being a quick or a genius character and having the schemer or scholar traits. Schemer of course helps when you are choosing the intrigue option, and scholar if you are going for the learning option. Lastly, with the intrigue approach, your chances of success are hurt if your capital is not in the Near East or Asia Minor regions, and it's especially hurt if your realm doesn't even have a county there, because how are you going to find his remains if you're not even anywhere near where he was? And on the other hand, on the learning side of things, you don't get any malice. Instead you get a bonus if you are Greek, because, well, if you're Greek, then it's a bit easier to claim that you are a descendant of a Greek guy than if you are not. And because of these things, it might be better to go for the learning option than the intrigue option if you do not have a capital or even a realm county in these regions, and your learning is less than 8 points below your intrigue. Anyway, as for the chances of success, base chances of succeeding in either option are 40% chance of success and 60% chance of failing, and then that becomes influenced by all those modifiers from your skills and your traits. And of course, you also get to choose how much money you wish to invest. If you decide to invest no money at all, well, almost no money relative to the spare no expenses option, then you will drastically reduce your chances of success, obviously. If you have a very high skill though, then it shouldn't matter too much which option you take, because, well, those high skills will completely negate the downside of not investing that much money, with about 24 in the relevant skill being the amount you would need to negate the malice from investing just the bare minimum. Now, of course, we don't want to have any risks at all, so we will go with the option to spare no expense. And if you have a tremendous amount of skill and all the positive things, then your chances of failure are going to be about as likely as finding a shiny Pokemon before reaching even the first Pokemon Center in a Pokemon game. Now, of course, if you do fail to establish a claim even with these odds, then just like with trying to find a shiny Pokemon, you can just keep trying, although it is going to cost you a lot of gold. Luckily for us, this time we did succeed in finding the Tomb of Alexander, giving us a follow-up event, and as you may have noticed, this did take us a little bit longer. It can go anywhere from half a year to over a entire year before you get that follow-up event. Makes sense. Takes a bit longer to find a Tomb of Alexander than to decide you want to fabricate a claim. Now, for this follow-up event, again, we can make an investment, though this time it is in the form of prestige. And of course, the more prestige we invest, the better our chances of success. Aside from this, the chances of succeeding here are modified by your diplomacy and the socializer traits. And of course, being a genius still helps. Your best chances are if you invest as much prestige as possible and you are a genius socializer with 30 diplomacy and have a 20 diplomacy chancellor. Of course, at that point, you might as well invest the smallest amount of prestige because your chances of success are so amazing. It's worth noting that the outcome does get determined the moment you pick. So if you want to change your counselor to an unskilled sycophant, then just feel free to do so right after you picked your option here. It does take a while before you actually get to see the outcome, about 1 to 2 years later, and then either you can congratulate your character on his new bloodline, or just try again if it failed. Alright, looks like we succeeded. We are now the heir of Alexander. Eternal glory awaits us, so we have gotten ourselves a bloodline. Now, of course, do note that if you are a female ruler, then you will get a female inheritance version of the bloodline. So you may want to bear that in mind, because it could become really annoying to keep the bloodline in your family if it is passed down a different line than you were hoping for. Of course, matrilineal marriages do work to get it to the children either way. If somehow, after all this, you didn't have a nickname, like this current character, you will get the great nickname, as you can see. And on top of that, there are a bunch of effects on this bloodline, which are pretty neat. You get some prestige, some levy reinforcement rate, personal combat skill, and Hellenic opinion, as you can see. And once per lifetime, you can use the invasion casus belli, which is very, very nice. If you don't know what it is, it lets you declare war if you are not bankrupt. Let's fix that. And then you can just pick a place that you want to invade, and everything you occupy plus the stuff in the kingdom that you target will be taken. The stuff that is in the kingdom that you target will be vassalized if possible, unless you occupy it, and if you occupy something, even if it's outside the kingdom, it will just be taken. So it's a great tool for just completely destroying an entire empire and making it a part of your own. And because it's in a bloodline, all your children can enjoy the same thing if you land them, and that can quickly spiral out of control and have your family just go and invade the entire world. Well, not that quickly, because they do need to actually get some land and have children and have those children get land. But you can imagine how that will go in the long run. Now, you might be wondering, after all of this, what gives me the best chance of getting this bloodline? Well, you want to be a reformed Hellenic Greek character with the scholar trait, genius, brave, ambitious, a martial education, 30 plus learning, 50,000 plus prestige, 2,000 plus piety, the Forged Bloodline ambition, 10 wars, a capital in Asia Minor, 30 plus learning and 30 plus diplomacy, and a 20 plus chancellor and court chaplain. And then of course go with the learning option in the choice between intrigue and learning. And then you'll basically be guaranteed to succeed in forging this bloodline. Moving on to India for the Ashoka bloodline. To get the event chain for the Ashoka bloodline, the requirements are fairly similar to those of the Alexander bloodline. You need to be an emperor, though of course this time in the India region, so that means Rajasthan, Bengal Empire or Deccan Empire when it comes to the initial de jure areas. Of course those can change if your game rules allow for that, but the region will always be this. Next, you need to have an Eastern religion. That means you need to be either Jain, Hindu, Buddhist or Taoist. Taoist is not found in India at the start, but because they are in the same religion group as the other three, they can get the bloodline if they manage to find their way into India. Aside from that, you need to be a player, you need to have 15,000 prestige, and you need to be an adult. And finally, of course, you can't already have gotten the event chain for this bloodline or have it forged already. Now, after you meet those requirements, there are ways to make it more or less likely. As for making it less likely, there is only one way to do that, and that's by being over 50. That halves your chances of getting the event. As for making it more likely though, there are a few more options. You can have traits that help you. The traits that help are charitable, brave, any learning education, any learning lifestyle, and especially scholar, as that doubles it further. And for non-trait options, there is a bonus for having high prestige, maxing out at 50,000, high piety if you are a Buddhist, maxing out at 2,000, having the Samrat Chakravartin bloodline, which you get for forming the entire Empire of India, and mutually exclusive to that, having the ambition to forge a bloodline. Now the bonus from having the Samrat Chakravartin bloodline is higher than the bonus from having that ambition. Lastly, there is also a bonus for having won 5 wars and a extra bonus for having won 10 wars. Once you get the event, you will see this, and then of course you will want to choose the first option to get started with the event chain. Shortly after you get the initial event, you will get a second event where you have to choose how much you wish to invest into getting the bloodline. Of course, the more you invest, the better your chances are of getting the bloodline. So let's just go for 1000 gold here. A little while later, you are going to get the first of 3 events about testing your character. The first is to test your bravery, and as you might imagine, you get a bonus here if you are brave and a malus if you are craven. However, do note, if you are brave, then of your skills only diplomacy can give you a bonus. If you are not brave, you can get an intrigue or a learning option if those skills are high enough. However, they only are actually worth it if your diplomacy is 7 points or 8 points lower than your intrigue or learning. Otherwise, simply being brave and choosing the diplomacy option is still just going to give you better chances than if you weren't brave and picked one of these other options. And the same will go for the 2 next tests. The second test of the 3 is about humility. Here you will get a bonus if you are humble, and of course a malus if you are proud. But other than that, it is exactly the same as the previous test. So you will need to have 7 or 8 intrigue or learning more than diplomacy for it to be worth not having humble in this case. Finally, we get to the third test of your character, and this is about charity. Now, unlike the previous test of your character, you are going to have to pay some gold to prove that you are charitable. Of course, there is a malus for being greedy, although the one slight upside is that if you're greedy, you can get away with paying less gold. But if you want to bloodline, you'll probably still just want to be charitable and have high diplomacy. And again, just like before, if you have 7 or 8 intrigue or learning more than your diplomacy, then it can be worth not having charitable, but in general you'll just want to be charitable to maximize your chances of succeeding in getting the bloodline. Once you have succeeded all 3 tests, you will get the event, and that is going to give you the bloodline. This bloodline is a pretty nice one, giving you 3% revolt risk reduction and a nice little bonus with all people of Indian religions, though not a Taoist, because, well, it is intended as a bloodline for India and Taoists are not normally there. And aside from all those nice little bonuses, it also has 2 casus bellis that are supposed to be associated with it. The Religious Liberation War worked as intended, but unfortunately the invasion casus belli that it's supposed to give you is completely absent. The reason for that is that they added the text about it having an invasion once per lifetime, but they didn't actually add the tag to the bloodline that gives you the actual casus belli. So it just says it, but it doesn't actually do anything. Anyway, let's accept this bloodline and go to the CD Raj over here and show off this casus belli. You will create a new ruler with your religion in a kingdom you target, and they will be your tributary. So it's not that great for expanding, but it is nice to increase the power of your religion, because you can get entire kingdoms out of other kingdoms as long as there is at least one province in that kingdom with your religion. Now if we scroll down here, we will see that there is a complete absence of the invasion casus belli, and it's not just because they're too small or something, because we also don't have it here or even on Tibet. There just is no invasion casus belli. Now, right now, this character already got the Cleansing Flame title, but if you don't already have a nickname, then the Ashoka bloodline is going to give you the Lion if you are a male character, and the Lioness if you are a female character. Speaking of gender, if you have a female ruler that gets the bloodline, you will of course end up with a matrilineal inheritance of bloodline, which means that if you happen to have your inheritance go through the male line, then it might be a bit more problematic to try to keep the bloodline in your ruling line. So do keep that in mind. Now, in case you need a recap on what gives you the best odds of getting the bloodline, you will need to have a learning education, a learning lifestyle, especially scholar, and the humble, charitable, and brave traits. On top of that, you want to be a Buddhist with 2000 or more piety, at least 50,000 prestige, 30 learning, 30 diplomacy, and have the Samrat Chakravartin bloodline, and finally have won at least 10 wars. Finally, one last note about both of these bloodlines is that any king or emperor over the age of 35 outside of prison ends up being at the risk of having a nasty little event. The event is the following. You have thought about your ancestor and he accomplished way more than you did in your youth. So you become depressed unless you are content. If you're not content though, you are stuck with that 25% chance of depression. Now of course, because we're mentioning these conquests here, there is a way to avoid this event, and that is by having won at least 10 wars. Aside from that, You also won't get the event if you are depressed or incapable, but then you have other things to worry about than the chances of getting the event, and you probably aren't going to want to aim to be depressed or incapable just to avoid getting an event about becoming depressed. And that's it for this video. I hope you have enjoyed it. I will soon make a video about the great works that were recently added, so look forward to that.